Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So it is 5:17 p.m. on a Thursday. I hope everyone is doing okay. I hope Brits were able to get out to vote in spite of Theresa May attacking the institution of democracy itself in Britain, rolling out those voter ID laws. Let me make sure I am up. I'm seeing green on one end. And I'm seeing, let's make sure I see green on the other. Guys, if you enjoy the content that I put out, please hit the notification button. I do videos all the time. I know notifications get lost. But I do them all the time, and hopefully for whatever they're worth, I hope you actually do get them. Also, please subscribe, again, if you find yourself coming here often. We're moving up. I'm still shocked as hell that we're up this high, but we're moving up, and I want to continue to move up. So please subscribe, please share, like, help through Patreon, all that other good stuff. You guys make the show. I did a video earlier on Slate that turned out really well. I looked at it, and I was developing an idea that was essentially rebuffing something somebody said in a Slate magazine. I'm going to do the same thing here, this time with the gray lady. One of my subscribers, and I know her name. God forgive me, I know her name. I'm on the spot. One of my subscribers, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know who you are. I swear to God, I know who you are. She sent me an article from the New York Times. Joan Lovino, and I know at this point, it took me a while to think of the name. I was put on the spot. I'm bad with names. I know who you are, Joan. I'm sorry. Joan Lovino sent me an article from the New York Times, and she says, hey, you might want to see this. The article is this. It's an amazing thesis. Actually, National Democrats should interfere with the primaries. Actually, they should. All of this huffapaloo about National Democrats sticking their fingers into the primary process before the voters even made a determination of who they wanted. This is nonsense. They should be able to do that. It's right for them to do that. In the last video, I did my best to do that video in 10 minutes. I'm going to do the same here for this video. I'm going to try to do this video relatively fast because I thought I liked the feel of it. Getting information out quickly and, you know, in a decent package in a way that's not meandering and everything else. So I'm going to do my best to develop the idea here in a similar way. Yeah, I'm going to clock myself. 3 minutes in. By 13 minutes, I should be done. And by 16 minutes, I give myself a C+ or something. Actually, National Democrats should interfere with the primaries. The basic thesis of this is really relatively straightforward. That all of this issues that the left is having with Democrats or National Democrats interfering into the electoral process and into primaries is nonsense. They should do it. Ultimately, she's saying, and Elaine Kamarck, I'm going to make sure I hit her point accurately, that parties have identities. And because parties have identities, they need to work to ensure that those identities are held throughout the United States. That it's not uncommon, nor is it insane, for parties to try to affect who comes into their ranks. Not to mention they want to be able to those people to be electable. So parties have a tendency to try to intrude in those processes, and they're not wrong for intruding in those processes. She used the Tea Party as an example, but she also brings up the fact that these guys have been attacking lefties all throughout the countries, and there's nothing wrong with this. Even saying that the attack piece and the smear piece that they used on a woman in Texas thing, Laura Mosler, was perfectly okay. They put out an attack piece on somebody who's running in the Democratic Party. Her argument is that's perfectly okay. She goes into two main demographics, making an argument that, look, in the communities where these guys are intruding in this, I think she counted like 14, there might be more, but in the places they're intruding, she started going into these demographics of African Americans and Hispanics, saying that the outreach is mainly going to be Hispanics because they're not large African American districts. I hope I quoted her accurately. And Elaine Kamarck, like I offered the other person, she's more than welcome to come on this show to have a conversation about this piece. Your argument is hogwash. It's nonsense. I'm sorry, it's nonsense. Now, before I get into this, just so I'm clear, there are parts of this that I agree with her on. The first part that I agree with her on has to do with this idea that parties have identities. Of course parties have identities. Otherwise, they wouldn't be a party. They would be so general, so amorphous, that there's no aggregation of thought and no aggregation of direction or anything else. They'd be pointless. So yeah, parties have identities. They have workable point of views that they tend to try to espouse through policy and action and everything else. Now, if that's true, the question becomes, what is the workable point of view of the Democratic Party, and what is the point of view that these guys are trying to espouse versus what they say they are? There's a difference in those things. Now, the question becomes, what is the workable point of view that they're trying to espouse all across the United States? And if they're going to put their thumb on the scale, who are they putting their thumb on the scale for? That's an important point, right? I mean, you have a party that says we have a workable point of view that we want to espouse throughout the United States. Elaine Kamarck says that's a good thing. It's perfectly okay for parties to do that, to put their thumb on the scale all throughout the United States for their workable point of view. That's the crux of our disposition. That's the crux of our argument, I guess. That this thing of, should parties be able to do this? I say no. She said yes. Now, to be fair, each of us have our own biases. I would imagine that Elaine wants to maintain status quo. She's sitting at the Gray Lady. She's comfy and okay. I don't want to maintain the status quo. I want the status quo to change. So right off the bat, let's list our biases. The fact that I want the status quo to change means I don't necessarily like the way things are. I don't like the workable point of view of the Democratic Party. I don't like that we only have two parties in this country and we get this kind of gamesmanship from these two things. And it's not just I don't like it. The rest of the public doesn't like it. So let's revisit this thing. This idea that the party wants to win. Yes, the party wants to win. And yes, the party has a workable point of view to espouse. But what happens when the workable point of view is out of sync with the public itself and the party uses gamesmanship in order to get elected? Where democracy doesn't really necessarily apply, when representative government doesn't necessarily apply. If you follow what Elaine is saying to the logical conclusion, the Democratic Party itself has a point of view that it wishes to espouse. And it cares less whether or not that particular point of view is something that the rest of the public wants. Which is the point. Democracy. Representative government. Imagine the situation where you have a public that does not like what they're espousing in the least, does not like what they're pushing. You had a situation where a black man with a Muslim name won on a topic of hope and change, this emancipatory hope and change, because the public was so wanting change that they were willing to go to a black man for the first time with a Muslim name. Please, give us change. You're black. Please. And he continued the policies of Bush. And they let those people down in dramatic fashion. That hope became some level of bitter regret. They wanted change so much that they were willing to run over the other side of the fence to Donald Trump because he seemed fundamentally different than anything else. What I'm getting at is you have a public that is craving and screaming for change. And your perspective and your point of view here is the party should be able to put his thumb on a scale to maintain the workable point of view of the status quo that the public is absolutely against. What you're saying is contrary to democracy. What you're saying is contrary to representative government. It's one thing if the public and the parties themselves are in alignment. The public and the parties are not in alignment. The two groups that you're mentioning here that the Democratic Party are probably going to rely on, African Americans and Hispanics, both groups are under threat. What you're talking about here is using the gamesmanship of a Hispanic group that believes that Donald Trump is probably going to deport them, even though the previous administration was doing deportations also. But Donald Trump is racist, so it makes it worse. But he's going to deport them, and you can use this as a, if you don't do this, he is going to take you out that country, he's going to kick you out this country, he's going to build a wall, you better vote Democrat or else. They're under threat. It's not that they love Democrats, it's that they're terrified of Republicans and what Donald Trump may do. African Americans, same thing, under threat. It's not that they love Democrats, they're terrified of Republicans. You have 90% of African Americans voting for Hillary Clinton. You believe that they love her that much? They're terrified of the other guy. So you have groups that are essentially under threat as your fallback position on getting Democrats elected. If that's what you're going for, meaning if the only thing that you can really dredge up are threatening other groups, so having other groups that are so terrified of the other party that they end up voting Democrat, and your policy to this is, your idea, your prescription is, Yes, let them interfere. Let them use whatever that workable point of view is that the public has pushed back against and didn't like. And let them still continue to espouse that status quo point of view and put your thumb on the scale to get that status quo point of view in. And when the status quo candidate that the public, for the most part, is repulsed by gets into that seat, and he's running against a more repulsive Republican candidate, and now you've locked in the workable point of view. Because either they vote for the repugnant candidate of the Republican side or the slightly least repugnant candidate on the Democratic side. You've gamed the system once again, and you've locked in your threat vote, the battle of the least worst. I find this to be a nonsense position, because who the hell wants to be in a country where it's always battling the least worst, and the party itself is not necessarily responsive to the whims of the public. The party itself has their own agenda in mind and games the system in a way that allows that own agenda by putting their thumb on the scale in the primary to make sure that the person who's running in the general with the Republican is least repulsive. It's not that they're going to get anything done. Oftentimes, the person they're putting their thumb on the scale with is antagonistic towards populist ideas. The party is putting its thumb on the scale to make sure certain people don't get into the process, not because they're weaker candidates, but because the party doesn't necessarily like what they're espousing. And what they're espousing is an economic message. And fact is that economic message is running contrary to what the Democratic Party is today because of who their funders are, but it was not necessarily running contrary to what it meant to be a Democrat prior. What you're talking about is essentially stagnation. You had a Democratic Party that lost 1,100 seats. What level of failure do you need to get across that the public does not want you? You lost the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court, and let's not forget the presidency to a has-been that's been firing has-been celebrities. That's your record of failure. And your argument here is let them continue to fuck it up. That's your argument. Where does democracy play into this particular argument? Because what it sounds like is you want the Democratic Party to essentially push their point of view on the public, even when the public doesn't want that point of view, finally getting the public to the point where they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, between a Democrat that's not going to do shit for them and a Republican that's going to actively go after them. Apathy and a corporatist versus somebody who's a corporatist that's somewhat of repulsive, even that much more, meaning they're going to be more rapacious to go after them. I'm sorry, Elaine. You have an anti-democratic argument. And it's an anti-democratic argument at a time where the public in the world, or the public is screaming for something else. Screaming at the top of their lungs for something else. So much so they were willing to go for Donald Trump as opposed to a status quo candidate. The problem here is the message that you're going with. The problem here is a problem with the party itself. The problem here is that the party never necessarily wanted to interrogate their failures, their fuck-ups, their foibles, and the problems and the reasons why people decided that they wanted a reality shows as opposed to Hillary Clinton. The problem here is for all of the failings all throughout the United States. They never interrogated why they failed. They never had a biopsy. None of those things were necessary for them. They turned around, attacked Trump right off the bat, pivoted, never dealing with the things themselves, screaming at the top of their lungs. They're uniting when 15 million people have left their party. At which point does democracy play a role into your calculus? At which point do you get to the point of saying the public fundamentally wants something different? And let's see what the public actually wants before we put our finger on the scale. But the fact is, that's not what the Democratic Party wants. What they want, and what you are essentially espousing, is for an ossified political system where the party itself completely chooses who it wants and puts these people into this awful disposition of having to choose between a maniac and someone who's a tick or two less of a maniac, but at the very least is not going to do anything for their best interest, is not going to do anything for them, is going to be a status quo candidate that's some corporate hat that's taking money while at the same token parroting lefty stuff in this kind of ambiguous way that doesn't really materialize into anything real. You're wrong. You're wrong because democracy means change. That there are times where people change. And at this time, we're at a place in this country of change. You lost 1,100 seats. And the What the Democratic Party is trying to do is completely bypass that without changing. And your argument here is, yes, that is a good thing for them to do, to essentially maintain status quo in their workable point of view. What I would say is, Elaine, if the Democratic Party wants to take your advice, which I think they are, each and every progressive who's running in those races who feel that they were cheated should run against that Democrat. They should come out and say, fine, you cheated me when I tried to run into your primaries, so screw it. I'm running into the general election, and I'm running on the exact same policy and platform that I was running at before. And if I pull voters away from you, too bad. You should have treated me right. That shows teeth. Stop whining, stop bitching, stop complaining. This woman, Elaine Kamarck, is essentially the point of view of the Democratic Party. I know I'm running over, but essentially the point of view of the Democratic Party. And it's what they've espoused, and it's what they've done. Take them at their word. This is what they believe in anyway. Which is what I've said they believed in all along. They have a workable point of view that they want to espouse throughout the country. The question becomes, if you as a lefty, do you believe that that point of view is the thing that you want to espouse? Do you believe that that's what the American public want espouse? And if you don't believe that, and if they're putting their thumb on the scale in the primary, and if you feel you were cheated in that particular process and you didn't get a fair shot, why on earth would you turn around and support the Democratic Party after they snubbed you again? They did it with Sanders, and they're doing it all throughout the country. Tim Canova had to get out the goddamn Democratic Party because he was being cheated so much. They destroyed documents, meaning the ballots. That's where we are. You had Ronan, who's running as a Republican because he didn't think he'd get a fair shot as a Democrat. All of these candidates, all throughout the United States. This is not a situation where the public chooses who they want, so then the Democratic Party comes in. No, the Democratic Party is saying outright, we are going to make the choice on who we want, and we were going to put the public in a rock and a hard place, just like Trump and Clinton, to vote for somebody who's not a knuckle dragger and at the very least can spell his name. If you think that the politics of the United States should be run in that way, where the party itself makes the total choice in regards to who they want, putting their thumb on the scale all throughout the United States to espouse a workable point of view that has failed 1,100 seats, and for whatever reason they want one more shot at the bat to fuck it up again. If that's how you believe that politics should be run, then Elaine Kamarck is right. She's right at that point. The failures and everything else are not necessarily a deterrent from trying to fuck up again and taking one more shot at the bat. If you believe that at some point the country itself says we want something different, and the country itself is pushing and striving for something different, you can see it in the politics, you can see it in the stuff that's been coming out in regards to the changes and the stuff that's been espoused in the political space that's been created by the Sanders campaign. You can see it. It's palpable. And yet the Democratic Party wants to tamp down these forces because these forces directly affect their donors. Let's be honest, this is not purely political. This is also, to some degree, economics. There's certain topics that they don't necessarily want to espouse because it, again, directly affects their donors. If you believe that politics of status quo should be instantiated, then Elaine Kamarck is right. If you believe that at some point the public says we want something different, that this public has been pushing and striving and doing their best, reaching out, flailing back and forth, trying to get something different, going to a black man with a Muslim name, then all the way over to Trump. They're flailing. They're looking for something different. And if you believe that, and if you say, look, democracy is supposed to be the thing that allows those people to express their political will at the polls. This is not purely about Democrats getting elected. This is about people being able to express their will at the polls. And the politicians are supposed to be the avatar of that will. And the Democratic Party has made the choice to tamp down on the actual avatars that the people may want, and instead trying to install their people into those positions, putting people in impossible choices of the corporatist hack or the maniac. She's wrong. It's called democracy. It's called a representative government. And the last thing that the Democratic Party should be doing, should be working, fighting tooth and nail to maintain a status quo that has failed so miserably and has lost all legitimacy from the standpoint of the American public, from the standpoint of governance. The New York Times is wrong. That's my point. Let's see who's here. I'm trying not to keep this one too long, but we have people here. Sometimes on the quick ones, there aren't many people. Dayzilla Adams from Claire, isn't that what we're getting now? I mean, Trump is the perfect distraction to draw the public's attention away from what's really happening and getting passed. This is kind of my point. They pivoted immediately to Trump, not necessarily dealing with their failures and foibles and all this other stuff. They pivoted immediately to Trump. There's nothing to do with change in the political apparatus itself. They're trying to instantiate status quo. And I'm saying, when the public wants something different, then the priority has to switch from this thing of, we just want to get elected, so we just want to do whatever we need to do, even if it tamps down on the democratic process itself in order to install our people into those offices. At that point, democracy matters more. When the public is pushing for something different, democracy and representative government matters more. She's wrong. She's dramatically wrong. She's completely wrong. What her name? Karen or Karmarck. You're wrong. You're demonstrably wrong. You're demonstrably wrong. Representative government matters more. Shagarot. They only have to distract because some are awake. Hillary would have put everyone to sleep. No need to distract anyone when the left is napping, and that's also true. Hillary Clinton being elected would have just put half of the left to sleep, or the people who call themselves the left to sleep. Donald Trump creates this frenetic energy. It gives this potential for change, actually, but the left hasn't been able to harness that particular potential. It's just been kind of all over the place. The one thing you would not be talking about, however, if Clinton was in office, was these lefty policies and all this other stuff. None of that stuff would be on the books. Democrats wouldn't have changed one iota. They would still be talking in the same way they talked prior to the election. At least in this way, they have to lie better, or they have to lie in the sense of lefty ideas. Yeah, if Hillary Clinton was elected, it would be different. You would have half of the left going to sleep. You have the other half pissed off that that woman was in office in the first place, bitching and moaning, but the other half telling them to shut up and quiet and silenced. 2020 is an amazing opportunity for the left. 2020 is an amazing opportunity. So I will leave it at that. I'm not going to keep this one long. Like I said, I was going to keep it short. So Balthazar. But Jamal, if we allow fair primaries, we might put a progressive in a general and therefore not be able to afford Hillary Clinton's email list. Nancy Pelosi. It's like, how are those lefties going to afford Hillary Clinton's email list? I mean, how is that going to work? How are they going to get enough money? Here's the thing. Those lefties have been raising money hand over fist in some of these primaries. They've been doing amazingly well with the fundraising, people giving small donations. I think what it is, people have gotten accustomed to some degree to giving on Patreon and Super Cash and everything else. YouTube is a massive site. Is it possible that because people have gotten more accustomed to those things, that they become somewhat more accustomed to giving to the political candidates small donations? I don't know if that's true. I'm just putting it out there. Bernie Sanders, I would imagine, and many of them are stealing Bernie Sanders' model. Kamala Harris being the first one that comes to mind. I'm going to keep this one short because I want it to be something that people can take in. Oh man, I kind of want to also mess with my audience. Let me do this. I'll do another one after this that could be a little bit longer for the audience itself. So I'll end this here. Joan Levino, thank you very much for this particular story. I love it. New York Times is wrong, absolutely. And if, what's her name, Elaine Kamarck, want to come onto the soapbox to have a conversation about it and talk about how wrong she is, she's free to join me to talk about how wrong she is and how horribly wrong and off this particular article is. It's wrong. Did I say it was wrong? Yeah, it's wrong. She's wrong. She's completely wrong. She's dramatically wrong. Unnervingly and utterly wrong. So, if she wants to talk about how wrong and completely wrong she is, come on to the soapbox. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. And once again, Joan, good looking out. Thank you very much. Thanks, guys.